A Ukrainian pilot flying a MiG-29 jet drops to 50 feet off the ground across the front line near Cersan as he locks onto an unusual target, a grain silo the Russians had turned into their drone command center. Target locked. The flight had been smooth. In fact, too smooth, but that was about to change. Here's how the Ukrainian jet tried to hit the Russian drone. At 10 o'clock hours local time, a Ukrainian MiG-29 screams forward at treetop level, hugging the earth at 50 feet. However, a Russian soldier watching at a checkpoint ahead spots the fighter jet from a distance. He shoulders his Igla man-portable air defense system and fires the infrared-guided missile quickly. The pilot sees the smoke trail spiraling up as the missile locks onto his engine heat. He immediately made a hard left, then a harder right into the missile's previous path, causing an overshoot. But that wasn't going to be all. 3 more launches followed within 4 seconds from different angles. The Russian troops were firing blindly, hoping proximity would make them lucky with their hasty shots. The pilot's SPO-15 Berezovka radar warning receiver stayed completely silent. The Soviet radar detectors couldn't pick up heat-seeking missiles. It was like having a smoke detector that only worked when there was already a fire. For the pilot, the rising smoke plumes were his only warning, as 3 missiles tried to converge on him simultaneously. He immediately entered a maximum brake turn, the 9Gs crushing him into the seat, blood draining from his head. Since the missiles couldn't match the impossible turn radius, all 3 overshot harmlessly. However, those launch plumes just painted a giant smoke signal in the sky, visible for 20 miles. Every Russian position from here to Crimea now knew exactly where to look. Now the Ukrainian pilot knew that he had to think in borrowed seconds, if he wanted to make it alive. He dove back down to 50 feet, threading above power lines at 540 knots ground speed. His radar altimeter screamed warnings constantly. The minimum settings showed 50 feet clearance, but the actual clearance varied wildly between 20 and 80 feet as the terrain rolled and pitched beneath him. At this point, one moment of oversight meant becoming a very expensive lawn dart. What he was doing was called nap of the earth flying at its most extreme, staying so low that the terrain itself breaks the radar line of sight every 8 to 10 seconds. But here's where he was wrong. Although he was using power line corridors because they guaranteed no surprise obstacles like cell towers or buildings, flying that low meant rooftop manpads teams could actually look down at him. More Iglas started launching ahead. More missiles dropped. The Russians kept firing blindly, hoping he'd fly into the missile's path. For the Ukrainian pilot, every hard turn he made burned 200 pounds of fuel, and he's got only 7,000 pounds in total. This meant that if he made 35 more turns like this, he'd be out of gas. So he was flying on borrowed seconds, by memory, and by his Mark I eyeballs alone. Though he was successfully winning the deadliest game of dodgeball, a Vietnam-era P-18 spoon rest radar was getting intermittent returns on his position. This monster operates in the VHF band at 150 to 170 megahertz, meaning its wavelengths could penetrate terrain better than modern X-band radars. His SPO-15 threat receiver started chirping urgently. Search radars were coming online, painting him across multiple frequency bands, trying to establish a firing track. In minutes, every SAM system within 50 miles would know exactly where he was. But first, he's got to survive the next 30 seconds. And to make things worse, another missile team appeared in a factory room with its missile already leaving the launcher. Now he's trapped between power lines with nowhere to go. He made a split-second choice. Rather than get hit by the incoming missile, he was forced to climb to 200 feet. This meant dangerous exposure, but better than getting hit by a missile at point-blank range. The SPO-15 threat display immediately explodes with contacts as multiple radar systems paint him across different frequencies. A Panzer S-1's 1RS-2E radar was switching between search mode with its 40-kilometer range umbrella and track mode at 20 kilometers, trying to lock him down for a shot. The search mode swept around like a lighthouse, while track mode focused its energy like a laser pointer trying to hold steady on a moving target. Then, as if things weren't bad enough already, a Krasuka 4 electronic warfare system joined the party. It began GPS jamming across the L1 and L2 bands at 1,575 and 1,227 megahertz. Russian air defense began to switch between search mode and track mode, trying to lock him for a shot. Then their electronic warfare kicks in. His GPS starts flickering, 8 satellites dropping to 5, then 4. His JDAM-ER bomb needed 8 satellites for optimal accuracy, giving it a circular error probability of less than 5 meters. Surgical precision. With only 4 satellites, that error could balloon to 30 meters or more. The difference between hitting the building dead center and hitting the parking lot next door. But Ukrainian engineers had anticipated Russian electronic warfare tactics. Their modified JDAM-ER had an enhanced inertial navigation system, using ring laser gyroscopes. Even with 0 GPS signal, it could maintain 10-meter accuracy for 2 minutes, basically remembering exactly where it started and calculating every tiny movement since launch through pure mathematics and physics. It was finally time to release the weapon. The Ukrainian pilot picked off the JDAM-ER. The 2,000-pound bomb separated cleanly and began its 40-mile glide toward the target behind him, its pop-out wings extending to maximize range. Now, he just had to survive the exit. The Russians were waiting. They'd set up an ambush flak trap, holding fire until he was fully committed to his escape route with no room to dodge. That was smart tactical thinking. Without delay, anti-aircraft guns opened up. The distinctive chatter of 23mm autocannon rounds filled the air. Metal started punching through the aluminum skin with sickening regularity. Every movement now required massive effort. His right engine takes a hit fast. Now he's on one engine, half hydraulics, and getting harder to control with every hit. But he's got one advantage. He was flying through his own sonic boom. The pressure wave was making everything shimmer for the Russian gunners as their shots kept going wide. The Ukrainian pilot started random jinking 2-3 G-turns every 2 seconds to mess with their targeting. Doing this on 2 engines would be routine, but doing that on one engine with failing hydraulics is like trying to do surgery on a plane about to crash. Through the chaos, the Ukrainian territory lay ahead, probably 35 miles ahead. The MiG barely responding, but still flying because Soviet engineers built them like flying tanks. And triple redundancy on everything means you can fly with half the plane shot away. Behind him, 40 miles back, his bomb, the JDAM-ER, was in its terminal dive, diving straight down at 287 meters per second. The Russian drone operators in the grain silo have 3 seconds left before everything goes kaboom. The bomb punched through the center support column, then through 2 more floors of concrete and steel. And it detonates. 445 pounds of high explosive transforms to pure energy in microseconds. The blast pressure hits 300 psi. The fireball reaches 5,000 degrees, and the concrete itself becomes bullets. The support column vaporizes, causing 8,000 tons of building to collapse, each floor hammering the one below, all in a total time of 6.2 seconds. The dust cloud rose 500 feet, visible from Ukrainian posts across the river. That didn't stop there. Another round of explosions rips through the ruins as stored missiles and drone batteries burst into flames, adding to the destruction. The Ukrainian pilot nursed his wounded MiG toward friendly airspace, running purely on one engine, holding minimum controllable airspeed, fighting failing hydraulics every meter of the way. His hands ached from fighting the controls. His flight suit was soaked with sweat, but he was alive. Behind him, the Russian drone command and control headquarters was gone, erased from existence. He made it. In the end, it came down to skill, guts, and a little bit of luck. The pilot survived what should have been a suicide mission. The Russians lost their drone headquarters and dozens of operators. 1 MiG-29, 1 JDAM-ER, and one hell of a pilot made the difference. And that's how wars are won. But the question now is, where exactly do both countries draw the line?